Welcome to this lesson where I want to talk about the fictitious organisation I'll be using throughout the course, Animals for Life. I want every situation, architecture and demo in this course to have a foundation in the real world, and I want to do this to help you visualise and understand the why behind the things we'll discuss and implement together. To do that, I wanted to create a scenario. So Animals for Life is the scenario that I'll be using throughout the course. So before we get started with the course, I want to quickly run through the scenario, and don't worry, it's going to be high level, so I'll keep it brief. Now, Animals for Life is an animal rescue and awareness organisation. Depending on the region, they're involved with local animal rescue and medical care, and then rehoming of domestic animals or habitat work for wild animals. Now, they're a progressive organisation and they're involved in lots of monitoring work. So this can be things like monitoring animal migration, as well as monitoring any habitat destruction which is going on worldwide. And so the work the company does involves IoT as well as big data sets. Now, they're a global company with a headquarters in Brisbane housing 100 or so staff. Now, this covers shared operations. So it's a call centre, general administration, IT staff, marketing, legal and accounts. Beyond Brisbane, there are 100 or so remote field workers who are deployed in regional Australia and various in-need locations globally. Now, these remote staff are a mixture of animal care workers, vets and research scientists involved in data gathering work. In addition, the organisation has a number of political lobbying staff to influence government policy. The business has major offices in London as well as East and West Coast US, specifically New York and Seattle. Now, the business's current technical infrastructure is a mess. They have a small on-premises data centre in Brisbane, as well as a number of colo facilities where they rent a total of 5 racks of space. The data centre is old, and the company who manages them is encouraging customers to migrate out as soon as possible. Now, Animals for Life have previously had a vendor helping the business run an AWS pilot in the Sydney AWS region. But it was badly implemented and it didn't provide the resilience and scalability that the business needed. In addition, the same vendor helped them with a few isolated Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud pilots. All of them were suboptimal and didn't provide the capabilities that the business needed. Now, all of the business's global offices, as well as their mobile field workers, consume services from the Brisbane office. Animals for Life is very cost conscious, but equally very progressive and willing to try new things and adopt new technologies as long as it has a business benefit. Visually, the Animals for Life operation looks something like this. First, we've got the headquarters based in Brisbane, Australia. Now, this location handles most of the core admin staff and shared business services, in addition to the core on-premises infrastructure. From a technical perspective, the on-premises network uses the 192.168.10.0 address range. It's a /24 or Class C address space. Now, don't worry if you don't know what that means. I'll be covering it later in the course. In addition to that, a previous badly designed AWS pilot uses the 10.0.0.0/16 range, and we also have a previous Azure pilot which utilizes 172.31.0.0/16, which again is a Class B network. Now, all of those will become relevant as we look at the potential business solutions later in the course. For now, I just want you to keep them in mind. The business has 3 non-Australian major offices, one in London covering the EU region, and then East and West Coast US, specifically New York and Seattle. One key fact to keep in mind is that these remote offices currently consume the IT services provided by the Brisbane head office, which has proven to be less than ideal from a performance perspective. Now, one fairly unique element to this type of business is that it does employ a large group of field workers who have varied skill sets and job roles. Some of these field workers are animal rights activists, some are data scientists or information gathering consultants. Some of them are working on Internet of Things projects, some on machine learning, or some doing big data projects out in the field. They carry various bits of equipment, including a rugged laptop with 3G, 4G, or satellite connectivity. They need to upload and download data which ranges in size and complexity. It might be email and file access, it could be chat and planning software, or even large research datasets. Now, whatever implementations we discuss or use throughout the course will need to support the working activity of these workers. And because of the varied time zones, the Animals for Life platform needs to be available around the clock. The nature of the work that these remote field workers do will mean that any outages will massively impact their ability to protect and work with animals. So let's talk a little bit about the problems that the business is facing. Firstly, the business is using on-premises hardware, and it's failing. The hardware is reaching end of life, and the data center the infrastructure is currently in is being decommissioned in 18 months. And the business is being asked to migrate out as soon as possible. New investment is needed, but the business is at a crossroads as to whether to use more on-premises, Azure Cloud, or AWS infrastructure. Now, the business's previous experiments with AWS and Azure have been messy, to say the least, and they've not been best practice. The business didn't really achieve any cost reductions in the limited trials that they ran, and the reliability seemed to offer no improvements over the current on-premises systems. We've got the issue that the field workers use the infrastructure provided from the Brisbane office. Because of their distance, performance is always suboptimal, and that's best case. Worst case, the system is down for maintenance during what is evening and early morning in Brisbane, but normal working hours for them. The business has always struggled with implementing highly available systems, and definitely struggles with scalability. The company likes to deploy systems which are lean and appropriately sized, and struggles with any peak periods or when hardware fails. Historically, this has prevented them from running progressive projects or larger social media campaigns. And to add to this, the business employs a small IT team who have experience in the on-premises space but struggle with using automation or cloud environments effectively. In the past, vendors have been brought in to assist, but the experience hasn't been ideal due to bad vendor choice. As a global business, Animals for Life has long had a drive to expand globally to more effectively support their non-Australia operations. Locating infrastructure space in a data center, as well as purchasing and deploying international infrastructure, has proved to be very expensive, and this has limited their ability to grow. Now, these are all pretty common factors affecting a business not currently using cloud computing. Throughout the course, we'll tackle the key areas of concern and look at how AWS can be used to remedy as many of these as possible. At a high level, what the business wants to achieve, or to put another way, what its ideals are related to these problems. The business requires fast performance for all of its field workers. These are the people on the ground implementing the business's core mission, and they need to be able to do that job without being limited by the systems the business uses. To further meet these demands, the business needs to be able to quickly deploy into new areas of the world as operations in that area are needed. Ideally, this should be achievable in an automated way using pay-as-you-go billing. It's an important clarification that in some areas of the world, if a natural disaster happens, the business may need capability for weeks or months before that need subsides. Ideally, through automation and usage-based billing, infrastructure can be provisioned and deprovisioned to match the basic needs of the business. So the infrastructure would be spun up quickly to meet a business need and then torn down when no longer required. Now, the business is incredibly cost conscious. It wants to use its limited funds to help animals in need. And so, ideally, the base cost for the infrastructure platform should be as close to zero as possible while meeting their requirements. But it needs to be scalable enough to rapidly grow when required. Core staff for the business work in very seasonal ways, and often, as I just mentioned, they have to react to disaster scenarios affecting various habitat regions globally. The infrastructure needs to be able to grow and shrink to cope with this. Agility is especially important to Animals for Life. The business often needs to leverage real world events, so launching social media campaigns at short notice to draw attention to disasters or other issues worldwide. Everything that the business does needs to be able to be provisioned rapidly, sometimes within 48 hours. Anything deployed should scale quickly as demand changes. It's worth noting that the business is very progressive and it wants to make use of emerging technologies such as Internet of Things, big data, machine learning, analytics, and much more. So whatever solutions are used should support that. And then lastly, related to many of the existing points, automation is paramount. The business wants to focus its funding on core staff who deliver on the mission of the organisation. Anything spent on IT, finance, legal, they're just supporting functions, and where possible, these costs should be minimised. Automation should be used where possible to minimise the need for additional IT staff within the business. You might feel, having listened to this lesson, that you have a good impression of the Animals for Life business, but you might also feel that certain areas are lacking. And in both cases, you would be right and wrong at the same time. There are definitely things missing, and there are areas which have enough information. Part of the journey through this course will be learning which areas are lacking, which areas need more information. And so if you do this type of work in the real world, you'll know when to ask questions, and more importantly, which questions. In an exam style situation, throughout this course, you'll be learning how to read exam questions, how to interpret them, and how to pick out which bits of information are relevant and which aren't. All of the AWS exam questions are based on real world situations. And so providing this scenario in the course, I hope, will give you some exposure to how to do real world deployments and real world architecting inside the AWS platform. Now that's everything I wanted to cover at this stage. Throughout the course, we'll be using this scenario when stepping through the architectural theory of AWS products and services. And where we do demos, they'll be related to the scenario discussed in this video. I've always found it better to base things around real world like scenarios, so hopefully you find the same. Now thanks for watching. At this point, go ahead and complete this video, and when you're ready, you can join me in the next.